Hey, it's Ryan with GPI. Today we're going to kick off a LT engine technical series. I wanted to do some videos to demonstrate from at least our perspective some benefits of the LT platform, talk some technical data, discuss some of the things that we look at that influence what we do as far as speccing a build, a camshaft, a set of cylinder heads, or rotating assembly. The engine is a fantastic piece. It differs some from our LS port-injected engines that we've been used to for years, obviously. And today I'm going to touch on some of the basics of the Gen 5 LT platform and not get into a lot of the crazy detail stuff. We'll have multiple videos that we'll segment that stuff into. First thing, that stands out with the Gen 5 LT engine, obviously it's a lot higher compression than our normal LS stuff from the factory. And 11.5 to 1 compression seems really high, for a pump gas engine from the factory. But not necessarily for direct injection engines. So, it works out to be about 9 to 1 dynamic compression. And dynamic compression is figured differently than static. Dynamic compression ratio takes into account when the intake valve closes. It also takes into account rod length and stroke. So when you build a stroker engine combination with the same camshaft, it's going to have a different dynamic compression ratio than if it had a shorter stroke. So why is this not too much compression ratio for a direct injected engine? And it's simply because the direct injection puts the fuel directly in the combustion chamber. So it gets a cooler, more atomized charge out of the injector versus a port-injected engine that puts it in the port that will get fuel on some of the port walls. If you have oily ports, you can get oil contamination in the fuel from port injection stuff. And that's something you still have to worry about a little bit with direct injection with not having any fuel. Cleaning the backside of the intake valve, you do get more carbon buildup, but that's just a byproduct of the direct injection engine. So really putting the fuel in the chamber allows it to have great atomization and a cooler charge. You're able to inject less fuel because you're wasting less fuel to make it there. And they just burn a little bit cleaner in that aspect. I mean, it just will take a little bit more compression and cylinder pressure than a port-injected engine will. Next thing is air-fuel ratio. We just talked about that a little bit. I heard that they like to run leaner. A little, but it's just not that simple that they like to run leaner. Like I mentioned, with DI, you can put less fuel in there to get an optimal burn and charge. So you don't have to put as much fuel in. So it certainly is leaner from that aspect as in terms of what you're injecting. Actual air-fuel ratio you measure in the tailpipe is going to be pretty close to what you would have with a port-injected engine, in my opinion anyways. They will tolerate a little bit leaner mix, probably maybe up to about 0.5 point. But for max power, we have not found that they like being much leaner at all than regular port injected stuff. So that's just that's our opinion on it. Which all of the stuff you're going to get in this video series is going to be our opinion and our beliefs on how we look at this stuff. Same thing when the guys are boosted. You can run that thing a little bit leaner, but it doesn't always have to be leaner. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say you have an LT4, you have a LT1 that you've built this setup and it's boosted. Let's say like 90% of the guys, you have to put methanol injection on it. Maybe you haven't gone port injection. When you start putting methanol in there, it starts acting more like a port-injected engine. Also consider that when you're putting methanol up front before the throttle body, and you're not doing it directly in each cylinder, you don't know where all that's going. I mean, most of it's obviously evaporating before it gets there, but distribution may not always be perfect with all of the manifolds. So running that thing a little richer may not show you the best power on the dyno, but it would be a better starting point until you can actually get out and see what you've got. So I would say, if it was my advice, I wouldn't err to the lean side of things. Run the fattest air fuel ratio possible to make good power. Start from there. Go to the track and see what it likes from there. Ignition timing. Why don't they need as much ignition timing as our LS counterparts? More is better, right? And why is it better to have the least amount possible to get the job done? The LT combustion chamber, coupled with the fact that it is a higher compression ratio, coupled with the fact that it is DI, it has an optimal fuel mix and atomization, it doesn't need as much ignition lead advance to fire off, to make max power. It's always best to have the most efficient combustion package possible. The combustion chamber plays a big role in this, in this, regards to how complete is the burn, how fast does it burn. More timing isn't always better. So the sooner you fire it, before top dead center, the piston's still coming up. The piston has to work against that. So there are some mechanical losses in having to fire it sooner. When you have a package that is more efficient that you can fire later and make max power on, it's going to be better. And I'm not talking about getting abusive to the point of being way over timed, 3 or 4 degrees more timing. I'm talking about it could be just 1 or 2 degrees can make a difference in that. A lot of our LS stuff on E85, well, let's say LS3 combustion chamber, may like anywhere from, we've seen anywhere, depending on the compression ratio on the combo, it may like 28 to 30, 31, sometimes even 32 degrees, depending on, the DCR and the chamber design. The LT stuff likes nowhere near that. I've never seen one of these like more than about 28 degrees of timing on the 85. And some of our best performing NA combos with our CID LT heads are down there around 24 and 25 degrees on the 85. So this is a case where more is not always better. It's relative to the combination and this platform. They just simply do not need the ignition advance that the port injected engines do in most cases. Injection timing and fuel pressure. Does it really matter? It does, and it doesn't. Another not simple answer. The injection timing event is very important. The window where you can get the fuel in, you've got about 6 milliseconds of good real estate there, but that's about it. And when you start working the fuel system harder, that fuel pulse gets longer. So to combat that, we will use fuel pressure to turn that up, to shorten that injection event. When you turn the fuel pressure up, it gets more fuel in a shorter amount of time. So at some point, in our bigger combos, especially with the 85, we go to the LT4 fuel system to be able to crank the pressure and get that injection event pulse width as short as possible. But in terms of tuning the start of injection, when the injection event starts, I've never, even on our large cam cars with bunches of overlap, I've never made any power changing that. I've done it on the engine dyno, I've done it on the chassis dyno. Maybe it's just me, but I haven't found any merit in changing the start of injection event. But I have with fuel pressure tuning and making sure that my injection event is within a certain window. And does DI make more power than port injection? Absolutely, it does, yes. As we talked about earlier in the video, the benefits of DI with the better atomization and better combustion event. It just makes more power, and the compression ratio plays into that as well. I mean, that obviously helps, but the DI is worth power over the port injection when you can run 100% direct injection. The problem is, beyond the naturally aspirated stuff, it's very hard to make big power on direct injection alone. So you start having to put port injection on or methanol injection, and at that point, you have to start treating it a little bit more like a port injected motor. So it's it's good when you can utilize 100% DI. It's absolutely worth more power. So the next video series the next video in the series is going to be cam selection. We're going to talk more technical info. Probably hurt some feelings on why the bigger cams aren't always better, but we're going to describe some scenarios where they are great in the right application. We just it just has to be, the combination has to be right, and that's why we encourage you guys to lean on us to let you know what's best for your setup, to make sure you don't get a mismatched combo that doesn't perform, that you're not happy with. The bigger cams on the LT engines just aren't always better, and it comes down a lot to static compression and dynamic compression ratio. So tune in for the next video. We'll try to get you educated on our cam selection process and the do's and don'ts. Thanks.